the middle. As the casket passes by, allow the casket to just go first, and then it's tradition for everyone to fall behind. Actually, in Hebrew, the word for funeral is halvaya, which means to escort. It essentially means that this person is important to us, and we are escorting her to the very, very end of the journey. The second round of pallbearers, please take their place. As we lower the casket, we're going to say a special prayer. Okay, we'll start with Mishtam David, a psalm that we say before the funeral service begins. Noah, we're going to ask you to come a little closer just so anybody who watches it later or is watching now can hear a little bit better. So Jewish tradition gives us two obligations at a funeral. One obligation is the obligation to give ourselves permission to cry, to confront the fact that we've had a loss, that our grief is real. And so the eulogies are meant to actually, I like to say, grief is at a simmer and we purposely bring it to a boil. But there's a second piece of it. And that is that it's meant to be an opportunity to celebrate a life, to really appreciate the gift of having shared a lifetime with someone. And so I'm going to begin that celebration of life. I'm going to ask Max and Amy to share a few words with us.
Just a few words. Go, go, go. And I assume many would agree. Go, go, go. I would say, and I'd assume many would agree, that it is hard to find a single word that encompasses Freda. Caring, loving, positive, funny. Although they are cliche examples, they broadly characterize who Freda was, ones that everyone who knew her would echo. With that said, I'm sure she's looking down on us with a grin, telling us to tell it how it really is, and to sprinkle in some humor, because that's exactly how a traditional Jewish funeral is. Naughty, opposite, stubborn. As I'm sure you are all aware, in 1995, shortly after my parents immigrated, a series of flights from Cape Town to Vancouver delivered a one-woman bundle of naughtiness. And we say that with the most love and with zero understatement. She was naughty. She was that person who, with the best of intentions, would be poking your ribs, squeezing your cheeks, or smacking your tush at a funeral just to cheer you up. If you can imagine any inappropriate action that could be done at a time it wasn't supposed to, but it may cheer people up or bring a few laughs, well, that was Freda. Occasionally doing the opposite of what people were supposed to do, but with the best of intentions. Opposite. Our childhoods were predicated on being able to approach our savta for certain requests. When our parents said no to candies, toys, or any activity, 604-263-3352 was the number you would call for a yes. The toy you were said no to 30 minutes before was in your hands 30 minutes later. Our faces caked with chocolate, our hands filled with Lego, her face with a massive grin, our moms with disappointment. To the dismay of the VTT brass, her name to students was Foxy Freda. Zero compromise, the opposite of most teachers, but it put a smile on her students. Her stubbornness, unparalleled. She refused to quit, hear out opinions that didn't fit her narrative, or anything that may disrupt her positive energy. She debated with doctors following her hip replacement, arguing that she could without a doubt continue her kickboxing classes at the ripe age of 77. Could have been a world champ. Her refusal to quit got her this far. As short as a month ago, she was certain she'd be in Australia this upcoming January. Outfits planned and everything. If it can cheer people up, go and be naughty. If it can make people happy, go and do the opposite. If it can keep the positive times flowing, go and be stubborn. Go, go, go. The energy never stopped with Freda. Make sure that coffin is sealed tight and make sure to pour a drink for her tonight and remember the good times.
Dahlia is going to share a few words as well.
My mother, Freda, was born in Cape Town 1937 to Jaime and Hannah Schneider. My mother was the fifth of 6 children. Her childhood was full of family and many friends. She was very close with her 4 brothers and especially her beloved baby brother Harry and her adored older sister Rosie. Some of my mother's fondest memories of her childhood were of Haboni Machane, the summer camp. My mother was very involved in this organization, and many of her friends she met back at camp have remained firm friends throughout her life. It is also at this camp she met my father, Freda Sher. While not much is known about my mother's father, Jaime's history, my Boba, my mother's mother, Hannah Schneider, formerly Bettman, was one of 5 siblings who were part of Isaac Ockberg's orphans saved from Poland and shipped to Cape Town in 1921. After my mother completed high school, she spent 1 year in Israel studying Hebrew. This was the start of her passionate affair with Israel. She returned to Cape Town, where she studied Hebrew and Judaic studies. After marrying my father, they made Aliyah to Israel, where they set up home in the suburb of Bet HaKerem, Jerusalem. My father worked at Jerusalem Post and my mother was a teacher. They lived in Israel for 4 years, during which time I was born. My parents returned to Cape Town to live after I was born, and my mother continued her teaching career. Soon after they returned, my brother Brian was born. And 3 years later, my brother Avron arrived. As most of you know, my mother was quite the firecracker. So to describe her as a passionate, enthusiastic teacher would be an understatement. I see Myra's eyes rolling. My mother was a very colorful character, often leading her colleagues into playful theatrics and dress up all in the name of education. Purim was definitely her hug. Education and children were one of her many loves. She was known for squeezing cheeks and calling her male students boychik. As I was growing up, my mother often worked 3 jobs: her full-time teaching post at the Jewish Day School in Cape Town, at afternoon cheder at local synagogues, and adults in Hebrew and conversion courses. So that was her profession. So how did my mother burn her energy? In her spare time, she was a league badminton player in Cape Town, a gym fanatic until recently, and dedicated fundraiser for the Home for Jewish Handicapped Children called Glendale. When my mother followed me to Canada, she brought her energy and spirit and love of Israel to Talmud Torah, where she taught for 10 years. Her vigor and zest for life was unwavering. But when my mother was with her grandchildren, that is when the true evidence of her excessive stamina and vitality emerged. One day when my son was approximately 7 years old, Max and his hafta were playing out in our yard. After a while, Max came inside with pink cheeks, looking exhausted. After a while, Max came inside the house with pink cheeks, looking exhausted. He looked at me and said, "Mom, I played basketball with Safta, then we played lawn badminton. Now she wants to play soccer, but I'm tired. Please tell her I don't want to play." My mother had a passion for travel and adventure. She loved to travel with family and friends. Both Myra and Barbara have many stories they can tell of travels with my mother, and I'm sure many they prefer to keep to themselves. 7 years ago, my mother met Sandy. Together they became the Vancouver West Side Couples Bridge champions and crisscrossed the globe traveling to visit family and friends and experiencing exciting adventures. Sandy has been a constant strength and support. For that, we are very grateful. My mother has been an enormous presence in her children's lives. Max, Amy, Ruby, and Ilan had the privilege of their Sabta's attention for decades. Her loss will be a huge void in her brother Harry and sister Rosie's lives, her children and her grandchildren, and her extensive global circle of friends. I want to thank everyone here for coming and for being a wonderful support to me, my family, and to my mother. Finally, on instruction from my mother, we please notice that my mother is here at peace with her beloved Machatonim, Miriam and Mike.
I want to add something that struck me. It's a very famous teacher of Tanakh. His name is Nechama Leibovich, who instructed to have one name put onto her headstone. It just says on it, Mora. And I understand that Freda, I always knew her as Savta. So I guess that title was the highest title you could have. But in South Africa, and those people who knew her from her days in Cape Town and perhaps also in Israel, they just knew her as Freda Sher. That was her title, Mora. And the Talmud tells us that Ha'olam mitkayem, the world exists because of Hevel pihem shel tinok shel beit rabban, by the breath of the children in the schools. And the fundamental idea is that single greatest activity that you could be involved in, the thing that the Torah thinks is the single most important engagement for a human life, is to be that person at the beginning of life who gives that spark of education, that zest. I'm a little jealous that I never got to be in her class. It sounds like it was a lot of fun. But I think it's remarkable. I don't think I've ever met a person who was a teacher on 3 different continents: Israel, Africa, and Canada. That's really remarkable. And I think it's a beautiful thing. Just want to reflect on one other idea of this idea of Mora. So the word for Mora means it. Sometimes it derives from the word Hora, which means instruction, but it also has a secondary connotation. And that connotation is someone who you revere, someone you look up to. And certainly Moses is that example. And one of the things that the Torah says about Moshe Rabbeinu is that to the end of his life, lo kata'ino, his eyes did not dim, v'lo tas kocho, and his strength did not diminish. So I think Freda was exactly that kind of person. I think it was only weeks ago that she was planning, in the middle of a pandemic, having a long-standing diagnosis of cancer, to travel to Australia for a bar mitzvah. That was the kind of strength she had from the time that the episode you heard with Max in the backyard till the last days of her life. It was that sense of someone who had strength and vitality. And I think it's the kind of thing that you always want to look up to, that you have this person who had this great passion for life, for teaching. I also want to add, Dalia said that Israel was her first love, that she really was so passionate about Israel, about Hebrew language, about Zionism. And I think that it's that too, to have people in our community, especially in this day, when you talk to rabbis, the greatest threat to the Jewish community is not infighting, it's not anti-Semitism, it's apathy. And to have the kind of person who has that kind of zest for life, for teaching, for Hebrew, for the Jewish people, for Zionism, that you can look up to and say, this is a person that I think she was affectionately referred to as Hurricane Freda. That she came in with all that kind of energy. She she displayed that passion, that zeal, that joie de vivre, really something to look up to. May your soul be bound in the bond of eternal life. Let's say amen. As we lower the casket, we're going to say a special prayer. The prayer is the prayer of Tziduk Hadin, of the acceptance of judgment. And essentially what this prayer is meant to say is, God, we don't always understand your ways. We don't understand your sequencing. We don't understand why some people are taken to us, even while it seems that they're very vital. But we accept that we had a gift that we're now compelled to return. And as we say this particular prayer, just on behalf of Dahlia and Brian, I just want to recognize that separated by thousands of miles, but only a very few short weeks, this is the second time that the family is experiencing a loss, losing a generation, and finding that the mantle of leadership is being placed on their own shoulders. And the prayer gives us the opportunity to both at the same time recognize our own grief and at the same time come to accept it and our agency in moving life forward. Please lower.
Can I just say something, please?
Sure.
When all my dear friends, particularly my ski friends, met Freda, they said to me, Sandy, it took you 80 years, but you finally got it right.
עצור תמים פולו, כי כל דרכיו משפט אל אמונה ואין עוול צדיק וישר הוא. עצור תמים בחופו עם יאמר לו מה תפעל השליט מה תמעל, ממית ומחיים מוריד שאול ויעל. עצור תמים בכל מעשה יאמר אליו מה תעשה אומר ועושה חסד חינם לנו תעשה בזכות הנאקד כשא אקשיב ועשה צדיק בכל דרכיו. עצור תמים ערך הבאים מלא רחמים חמנה וחוסנה על אבות ובנים כי לך אדון הסליחות ורחמים. צדיק אתה אדוני לנו תל חיות אשר בידך בתון כל רוחות חליל לך זירין מומחות יונה עיניך ברחמים מלא מומחות כי לך אדוני רחמים והסליחות. אדם אם בן שנה יהיה שנים יחמה ירחוב וכולו היה ברוך דיין אמת אמת וחיי כי אמת דינו משוטט הכל אינו משלם לאדם חשבונו ודינו והכל לשמוע דייתנו ידענו אדוני כי תדין שפתך תתברך ותזכיר בשבתך ואין לירח עד משפטך צדיק אתה אדוני וישר משפטך דיין אמת שופט צדק ואמת ברוך דיין אמת שכל משפטיו צדק ואמת ושכולך בידיך צדק מלאים ממך בידיך רחם על פליטות צאן ידיך ותמר למלאך ערב ידיך גדול היית סבר רב אשר אין לך בכבוד על כל דרכי בני אדם ותשכיר דרכיו וכפרי מעל עליו להגיד כי אשר אדוני צריב לו ולדבו אדוני נתן באדוני לקח אישים אדוני מרח הוא רחום יחבר עוון ולא ישכיב ולא ישיב אבו ולא יעיר כל חמתו. As I'm sure everyone here knows, that Jewish tradition teaches us that this should not be the work that we pass off to strangers, but rather it should be friends and family and members of the community who pay this final kindness. That said, I'm going to add a twist to the tradition here, which is that before you take up the shovel, so before you take up the shovel, I'm going to ask you to just use the Purell sanitize your hands, and then after you've used it, we'll be double sure to do that. Again, our traditions are that we for our first deliveries of earth, we use the back of the shovel. It symbolizes that we don't come to this with any sense of comfort. And similarly, we don't hand the shovel to another. We're going to reinsert the shovels into the pile. That actually gives people the opportunity to do the Purell, A, but B, it says that we don't willingly pass this on to anyone else. I will ask those who feel physically and emotionally able to participate as in turn in this mitzvah. Ready to take your turn. Come to me. I'll do the hand sanitizer.
You can pick it up. Thank you.
We're now going to say the Kil Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer.
אל מלא רחמים שוכן במרומים, השם מנוחה נכונה, תעדכן כשכינה, לעבור קידושים טהורים, כדבר הקים הזרים, את נשמת כל המצוות חיים שהלכה לעולמה, בעבור שמשפחתה מתפללים בעד הזכרת נשמתה, בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתה, לכן ברחמים יסיר שכנפיו לעולמים, ביצור החיים את נשמתה אדוני הוא נחלתה, ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר אמן.
אמן.
ועלמה דיברה שירותי וימליך מחותי, בחייכון וביום לכון ובחיי אתמול בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהא שמי רבם יתברך לעולם ולעלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה כשבחתה ונחמתה לאמרן ועלמה ואמרו אמן.
אמן.
הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
אמן.
We ask Mechila forgiveness from those whose space we use to accomplish this mitzvah. We also ask Mechila, we ask forgiveness from Mir Shulamit Bat Chaim for anything we may have done inappropriately in the process of Tarah and Kurah, the process of burial, or any of its preparation. We now turn from giving respect to the departed to giving comfort to the mourners. I'm going to ask everybody at intervals of 2 meters to form 2 facing lines along the path. And as the mourners walk through, we offer the words of comfort of our tradition. Those words in English are, may God comfort you amongst the other mourners of Zion in Jerusalem, and in Hebrew, Hamakom Yinachem Etchem B'toch Sha'ar Avelei Tzion V'Yushalayim. We ask everyone now to form the rows.